Then, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
The following is a world-class Bullshitters exclusive.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our newest show here on World Class Bullshitters, Writing on Writing, with me, Jeff Hicks, your host. Tonight, our inaugural episode, we have one of the biggest names to ever appear on the channel. He's a very talented writer, he's an award winner, and I'm excited to have him on because I've known about this guy for quite some time. Say hello to Larry Correia. Larry, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
The pleasure's all ours. Now, Larry is not alone, as you can see. We also have Casey Ezel. Hello, Casey. How are you doing this evening?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for coming on the channel. And folks, we've had our friend Drew on the channel quite a few times before, but it's always great to hear from him. Drew, how you doing, man?
Doing great, Jeff. Great to be here. Let's talk about some writing.
Yeah. So I apologize if my internet gets a little funky, folks. As you know, this morning, Good Morning Pop Culture was not able to be broadcast because of this, and I don't know what's going on. They must be trying to dampen the signal, but that doesn't matter. We're going to keep on streaming to give you guys more world-class content. Now, before we start tonight's show proper, have we all been? Has anybody here seen the new Indiana Jones? Has anybody seen Mission Impossible or The Sound of Freedom? Some of the movies that are in the big conversation right now.
I saw Mission Impossible last night.
I have seen nothing. I've seen none of them. My writing time unfortunately sucks up a lot of what would normally be movie watching time.
Understand.
Yeah, I'm with Larry. If I'm not writing or flying, I'm right now packing my house up to move. So.
Well, as somebody who just did that themselves, I understand what you're going through.
We're not the only ones. We're not the only ones that didn't see Indiana Jones, though. Apparently.
Yeah.
No. The movie is a disaster in some ways. It cost upwards of $800 million is one of the rumored numbers, and it needed to make that kind of money. It needed to make that kind of money to break even, and it's not going to do that. It's sitting in, I believe, the 300s right now. So Lucasfilm has another mistake on their hands. And so, Georgian, we'll get to your button in just a moment. But one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight was Indiana Jones is a classic character, but he's been used a few too many times now. He's just kind of a joke. So I wanted to ask you guys, why can't Hollywood find the right balance with new modern characters? It feels like if they'll take some risks on a low budget movie type of thing, but they won't put the right time or effort into something that can stick around longer than one movie. So I wanted to ask you guys, what do you think could be the reason behind that? Larry, we'll start with you.
My guess, honestly, is bureaucracy and cowardice. They've gotten away from trusting actual creatives and actual creators, and they've just become formulaic and boring. And it's easy to just recycle the stuff from our childhood, and it's just kind of a waste. And so they're trying to cash in on an 80-year-old guy with our nostalgia, and they did the same thing with Star Wars recently, and they've been milking Marvel to death for decades now, and it's just kind of tragic. There's so many good things out there they could draw from, but that would require them to go outside of their little comfort zones. And I could tell you guys some stories as we go, but these people don't read.
Well, they seem to pride themselves on not being aware of just the source material in terms of Star Wars. It's like, oh, we want to have people that haven't seen these movies because we want a fresh take. A fresh take doesn't mean ignorance, but I'm always blown away by the people that write comic books that don't even know anything about a comic book trope or the lore or the history. Drew, you can attest to that. How many people that are in the industry right now have no idea what they're talking about?
Yeah, it's pretty much the whole. I was going to say the whole Marvel team, the whole Marvel Studios writing, quote unquote, writing team. None of them have read it, or they're told not to. They're told not to look at any of the writing credits, and clearly, the Scarlet Witch show was clearly evident of that because they had no clue about who Mephisto was. Like all these little hints and nods. We're thinking, oh my God, they're going to hit Mephisto coming up later. And they're like, who is this? So clearly they don't care. And that's a big problem, in my opinion, when you have a comic book a character in a comic book from a comic book medium that's now on TV. It's I see it as a problem.
Now, Larry, in your work, you do a ton of research because one of the things people love to talk about with your work is the accuracy to firearms and things like that. And so, how much time do you put into research before you even attempt to, go for a first draft?
Oh gosh, usually if it's a topic that I'm familiar with already, then just it doesn't take very long. But if it's a topic I'm not familiar with, boy, I go deep. I'll usually do a month at least on a book if it's stuff I'm not familiar with, and then I start writing, and then I just keep going back and correcting it. And that's because honestly, when you're writing a book, you got to get it right. You got one chance. Movie people, they have this advantage of like the cool visual, and they can do stupid things and just quickly move to the next thing. Writing, we can't get away with it because the way people process information as they read, if I screw something up that they know, it instantaneously kicks them out of the book. And they're going to be angry at me because I broke all that immersion. I don't get the advantage of awesome special effects to distract you every time I screw up. So I do quite a bit more work than they do on that.
How about you, Casey?
Yeah, so I think that, well, which of the questions do you want me to answer first? So when I am writing, again, similar to what Larry said, if I already have a passing familiarity with the topic at hand or whatever it is that I'm going to be writing, I will most of the time kind of research as I go. As an example, my first novel was set in World War II, and it's an aviation war story. I am a retired military aviator, but I did not fly B-17s. I flew helicopters, which are very different. And so while I had sort of a baseline of aviation knowledge, there was quite a bit of research that went into that specific type of aviation. And for me, for my process, I have to, once I have that sort of established baseline of information, then I can start writing the story and find out what the story needs to make scenes and characters and actions ring true to what I'm trying to do with the story. And I think that for me anyway, that's one of the things that has, as Larry said, sort of thrown me out a lot of the the new school of some of our old favorites like Indiana Jones and Star Wars and stuff, is that the actions and the scenes and the characters don't really ring true to the feeling of the property that I remember from my childhood, right? I think that Hollywood has this they're very well aware that there is a lot of really, really good money to be made in nostalgia. But in trying to be nostalgic, I think they're going about it the wrong way, because not only are they're trying to revisit the the fantasy worlds of our youth, by our, I mean just generic adults, right? The fantasy worlds that we grew up in, like Star Wars and the comic book, the Marvel universe, and things like that. But rather than actually putting us back in that world, which is what true nostalgia is they're trying to tell a new story in a new way, and they don't capture the feel correctly. And part of it is probably the lack of actual true research. It's one of the reasons why the Mandalorian series, in my opinion, had such a different feel, especially for the first season, than the rest of sort of the new school Star Wars stuff, because the show team behind the first season of The Mandalorian were fans of the original Star Wars saga. So they knew that feel and they knew what they were going for. And they were still able to tell a new story, a new creative story, and a new twist on it, but it still felt like it belonged in that universe.
Well, it's like how Tim Zahn's Star Wars novels are so good, is because Tim knew the universe, loved it, cared about it, was passionate about it, and tried to give the fans exactly what the fans wanted and was respectful to them. And you compare Tim Zahn's work to a whole bunch of the other ones that are just like, you know, I'm gonna deconstruct. Whenever one of these jokers says I want to deconstruct something, it's just like code for I'm too lazy to learn why the first one was good, and I'm just going to do whatever the hell I want and be like, I'm so artistic. It's just a lazy cop-out.
Deconstruction is one half of the issue. The other half is reconstruction after that. Like Alan Moore is very famous for deconstructing characters and building them back up. So like in the comic book medium right now, a lot of characters, like say a Tom King, he is good at deconstructing and breaking down a character, but he just leaves him there. He does not do anything to build him back up, make him stronger and better from where he was. That rebuilding process is what's lost.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You got to have both. I mean, and so it's one thing that takes a deft hand as a creator is when you take an existing character and you move them forward in a series, you still got to give them new challenges and you still got to have them work and learn and grow, right? The lazy way out is you just take away everything that happened before and you render them back down to nothing and you make them go through the same journey again. That's like so Luke Skywalker, you know, you forget all the cool heroic stuff he did before and now he's just a broken down old dude who's lonely and pathetic. And then like this Indiana Jones, broken down old dude who's lonely and pathetic and his wife left him and his son died. And so, you know, what's the point? That's just lazy. If you want to write a good returning character, you take that where you left him and you build on it and you give them new challenges and new opportunities to grow and experience stuff, but they're still who they are. Lazy. It's just lazy to take what existed before and throw it away. It's like you have to deconstruct, but they can't reconstruct.
Right. You have to acknowledge that if you want to do it right, if you're using a pre-existing character, you have to acknowledge the growth that the character experienced before you. And if for some reason you're going to make that growth invalid, you have to do more than just take everything away from that character, because you can take everything away from a person. They still have their experiences. They still have the things that they've learned. They still have the maturity that they've gained through going through whatever it is that they went through. So if you just say, okay, well, they lost everything and therefore they're back to being a buddy, or they're back to, you know, being emotionally incompetent or not being able to connect on an emotional level with the other characters, there's no reason for that, and it rings false and it feels cheap, and it cuts people immediately out of the story. There's a comment in the thread by RJ McCready, I hope I said that right, that said Maverick proved people want to see heroes remain heroes, and that's a great example of exactly what I'm talking about. In the sequel, in Top Gun Maverick, we see Maverick, 20, 30 years later, whatever it is. And he has lost a lot, right? His career's been capped. He's been capped at an 06 level where, his best friends are admirals. He hasn't been able to do anything. He hasn't been able to command. He's had personal losses. So the creators did take a lot of things away from him versus where he was on top of the world at the end of the first movie, but they did not take away his character growth. And so when we start with Maverick in Top Gun Maverick, we have a whole person, a three-dimensional character that has more growing yet to do. And some of that growing is due to the things he's lost, namely, his friendship with his dead best friend's son. But that's the kind of growth that we need to see, because it doesn't negate what went before.
Yeah, I agree. I think Maverick is an example of them actually getting it right. And I think it was perfect. So Maverick was still Maverick. He was still the Maverick we knew and loved. It wasn't like what they did with Han Solo. It's like, It's like I'm a broken old man living in a van down by the river. Right. And they didn't upstage him. They didn't. Part of the deconstruction reconstruction cycle is they always have to upstage what came before, right?
Yeah.
Like the new hotness has to be better.
Right.
And in this case, it wasn't. I mean, Maverick still had tricks up his sleeve. He was still the guy who would do the stuff that was crazy, and the young guys didn't upstage him. He mentored them and made them better.
Yeah.
And that's good storytelling. That's powerful character growth.
Yeah. Another one that I thought did a really good job of this nostalgia piece that I'm saying that Hollywood is trying to do with these other things was Ghostbusters Afterlife. Not the Fembusters or whatever it was, but the one where it's the main character is it's a whole new cast of main characters and they're kids, which is awesome when you consider what we're talking about here. Ghostbusters was a staple 1980s movie. Now, it wasn't a movie where like Goonies or Stand By Me or any of these kids running around in the woods doing crazy stuff movies, but those were also a staple of 80s entertainment. And so that type of callback is what I'm saying that Hollywood is trying to do when they're trying to plug into nostalgia. Stranger Things is another great example of that nostalgic feel of throwing back to the types of shows that we all watched when we were kids in the 80s, because I'm dating myself right now. And but the thing that it did so well is that it paid tribute to the original movie. It didn't negate the original movie. It called back to the original characters. It honored the original characters, and it honored the growth of those characters, but it also told its own story. And you were able to then see, here's the rise of some new characters and them learning their own lessons, and it still had that feel of the original Ghostbusters movie, which is one of my favorite movies of all time,
Same here. I absolutely love Ghostbusters.
Love that flick.
Yeah.
So I've been working on this Ghostbusters parody for a little bit. Folks, check out Wokebusters. There'll be more comments or more updates coming soon. But I'm glad you brought up deconstruction, because it's the thing that plagues some of my favorite characters. I can think back to the reboot of 007 as well, where they're always trying to change the character to this modern interpretation, which I don't even like it the way I used to. I always call it the dreaded D word here on the channel, because I'm friends with a guy, Script Doctor. He's worked in Hollywood, still, writes movies and stuff like that. And we always talk about how deconstructing these classic characters just kills the interest moving forward. And if Hollywood's a money-making endeavor, it kind of is a bad idea to try to deconstruct some of these characters that are institutions, because people are emotionally tied to them in ways that you can't always put your finger on it, because what those characters are, they mean a lot to so many different types of people. And they try to tell you that in the modern world, that type of character just doesn't fly. But you guys brought up Top Gun Maverick. I mean, that was one of my favorite movies of last year. I was very happy to see that one, and it made me a Top Gun fan, even though I didn't really grow up watching the first one. I love 80s movies. It's my favorite decade, but Top Gun was just always the one. Everyone's like, oh yeah, Top Gun. I'm like, it's good. I like it kind of, but it wasn't, Ghostbusters or other things like that for me. But it really, the way they handled that story made me a Top Gun fan and a Tom Cruise fan. I mean, they treat Ethan Hunt the same way in these movies. So many movies today, they like to talk down to the main character to put him in their place, but with the new Mission Impossible, it was a nice ensemble where everyone kind of played the right part and built up the story. It wasn't, in the service of one character like a Rey Skywalker or something silly like that.
Yeah, Ethan Hunt officially to me is Captain America. He is the definition of Captain America now, and that's what we should be looking for. And hopefully, if Falcon Cap is half of this, Marvel may be onto a halfway decent start. But the new Mission Impossible I really, really enjoyed, and Tom Cruise was terrific in it. And we got a little glimpses into his backstory before he joined the IMF, which was a first. Never seen any of that. So, yeah, I don't know about you, Jeff, but I really, really enjoyed the film.
Oh, dude, I saw it on an advanced screening on Sunday, and
man.
One of my favorite movies this year. Like, I paid to see it myself. I'm not shilling out. I'm not a paid critic or anything like that. But it was such a refreshing movie because, I pay to see The Flash. I pay to see Indiana Jones. I see all of these movies that come out, and it's mind-boggling how they handle characters. It's like it's written by an AI or a boardroom full of monkeys or something where they just kind of, hit the keyboard left and right. I don't know how they do it. And Larry, you've written so many stories, so many books with characters. It's got to make you even angrier when you watch these movies and you go, how the hell do people get these jobs? Same thing with you, Casey. How do people get these jobs that they're being paid exorbitant amounts of money to write this? Like, how is that, quality work?
It drives me nuts. I remember one time it was after The Last Jedi, and I'd written a review where I just kind of breaking down the story issues, and somebody got on and they were like, "How dare you?" And if you think you could do a better job, you should write a better story. And I was like, done 25 times already, and planning to do more. True story. So one time I was actually out in Hollywood, and this was for a project that did not happen. It didn't go through. But I was, I think of what I can tell here. I was meeting with some producers, and we were at this really fancy restaurant in LA, and we were just kind of hanging out and eating and talking about the movie. And the realizations that I came to was that these people, for the most part, were illiterate, as in they did not read books. And the fact that we had gotten a couple of these these higher level people to read a couple of my books and actually read the entire book from beginning to end, the lower level people were all astounded because that was amazing because no one ever reads books. They just it's a culture that doesn't read. And it's kind of mind blowing. Plus, too, then they were started talking about casting it. So speaking of characters, and for the studio people, it was all about who they had under contract, who they had deals with, who they were trying to promote at the time. None of them were right. None of them were even close to good fits for the characters of this particular book. And I'm starting to I'm sitting there just kind of freaking out, right? And there was another guy there who was a very experienced guy who had been through the Hollywood ringer. Several of his books have been made into movies over the years. He reaches under the table and he taps me on the leg and he brings his head over and he whispers to me and he goes, he's like, "Larry, just let it go, man. No one gives a crap what the writers think."
Wow. Wow.
Well, yeah, that's it. That's exactly it, right? It's two different, it's two different worlds, really. And I think this is, I don't have any evidence at my fingertips to back this up. So take that for what it's worth, right? But my understanding is that a lot of these, especially these big budget projects, are essentially written by committee, right? And yeah, I have done plenty of collaborative projects. I collaborated with Larry to edit, 3 different anthologies, and I co-write with a ton of people on my novels all the time. And I'm here to tell you that each collaboration is a very different dynamic, right? And the more people you have involved in a collaboration, the more complicated it's going to be. So when you're dealing with a team of, more than 3 people, really, trying to take a character and make this character someone that everybody is happy with is an impossible task. It's an impossible task, right? Because if you're building a person who reads like a real person, or who presents like a real 3-dimensional, complex, flawed, interesting individual, you're going to piss people off, right? And when you're trying to please more than 3 people, I mean, hell, this happens in collaborations that I've done with only 3 people. I mean, I have literally had to sit down with my co-authors and be like, look, this character is my character. You have entrusted me to write her storyline. This is the way it's going to be. This is how I'm going to write her. And if you can't agree to that, then we can't move forward on this project. You know what I mean? So I can only imagine how difficult that must be when you're talking about, a movie budget where you've got a beloved character that so many people are invested in, and, a team of I don't even know how many writers who are trying to please everybody. It's risky, and you cannot take risks if you're trying to please everyone. And that, I think, is at the core of the problem with a lot of these stories.
You say you don't have evidence of that, but I think we actually recently have a really good example of this. The Witcher. In that case, you had where Henry Cavill is like hardcore super nerd fan of the original work, and he loves it and he's passionate about it. And then you got the showrunners, the committee, and it sounded like basically like like a prom committee of mean cheerleaders, just kind of yelling at the guy that that's not the direction they want to go. They're going to do their own thing. And so you had where you had the actor and really the personality that people are tuning in to see, button heads with that committee. And one guy was passionate about the source material. And it's interesting, too, I think we talk about Tom Cruise being a movie star. One of the reasons I think that his stuff is good now is he's enough of a powerhouse that when he says Maverick is this or Ethan is that, it is what it is,
Well,
and
he's an executive producer on all of his projects. Yeah, which means that he's putting up money for it, which means that he's the guy that, gets to make decisions.
Yeah, like, can you imagine, like, I would imagine at this point, like, if they had John Wick 5 and they wanted Keanu Reeves to take a wildly different direction, he'd just say no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
and
is
we
good.
used to see that, right? I mean, I feel like we used to see that when, and again, if I bring this up and immediately can't think of a concrete example, but I feel like we've seen that before when you've got, someone portrays a character and they do a great job and they're very celebrated for it, and then the storyline goes in a different direction, and that actor or actress says, Silence of the Lambs, which I actually, to be fair, I actually loved the sequel movie Hannibal, but Jodie Foster refused that role because she did not like the direction it took the character of Clarice Starling, and I don't know that we see that anymore, where actors are like, no, this is not the character that I helped create. And I don't know if it's just a money thing or what, but yeah.
I was surprised Harrison Ford didn't say no to some of the decisions with the last two Indiana Jones movies, because the fifth one's bad, but that fourth one, they did so many dumb things outside of nuking the fridge. And I guess he just only cares about the money, or he's just detached, or wants to hang out with his friends, or maybe he just wants the attention. I don't get it. I'm not inside of his head, but...
We'll toss in 2 more zeros in the check if you shut up. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's I can sit here and judge, but no one's offering me $30 million to show up for a couple days.
Exactly. I mean, it's easy for us to say here and critique.
While it is true, we're also the people that are required for those people to get paid. I know it seems like we're a long way down the food chain of all this stuff, but if the audience doesn't show up, these people can't command these things in the future. I mean, they say there's certain companies are too big to fail, certain actors have never had a flop, but sometimes that does happen to these people, and after a while, after too many of these failures, you have to kind of, I mean, some of these things have happened to people like Bruce Willis. There was a time when Nicolas Cage did a bunch of crap and it really killed his career, and he had to make a resurgence in a different way, and I know he's crazy and that's a whole different offshoot, but I mean, it does actually matter. I know they think that they're too big to care, but no, it does, because if you're not marketable anymore, you don't have that power. That's why Tom Cruise can hold the power, because has he ever not been marketable in his career?
No, I mean, he had that time period where there was all the controversy with the Scientology. When he went a little crazy on Oprah, but he just kind of he chilled out after that, and he just kept making good, solid entertainment products. Will Smith was a guy that was on top of the world. I think he had like one of the longest runs in the history of Hollywood, where he was in big budget movies that each one made money. I want to say he had like a 10-year streak where he didn't have any sort of loser at all. And look at where he's at right now. Yeah. And it's just it's a very fickle business. But I do think it's honestly the stars of these big productions that have the most clout to make them not suck, because they're the ones invested. Because they're the ones, when you think of that character, you picture them in your head. And so it's honestly, it's their legacy. So it behooves Harrison Ford to like take a stand and not do stupid stuff. But then again, he might be a really good actor, and he's had some fantastic roles over the years. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he's got a good handle on storytelling either.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
totally
it's a different
wheelhouse.
Yeah, exactly. Acting is a different form of storytelling, right? I mean, just like I can write a damn good novel, but I can't write a video game. So it's a different form of creation. I think that we're
I
talking
play
about.
a lot of video games.
Yeah, same.
I can write a comic book. I can write a comic book in a few hours, and honestly, I can't write a novel. I can't write a screenplay.
Yeah.
I do not know where to start with a novel.
Right.
You guys got to be there.
I could probably be an actor though, but I would be like one of the generic mafia guy that gets killed in the background of the action scene because that's what I look like.
You've got the
I'm
hat for it.
I know I'm ambiguously ethnic and very large, and so I'm that guy. I can be a Russian mobster. I can be an Arab arms dealer, and John Wick could kill me, and so I could have a good career of that. I think.
Yeah.
Arab arms dealer number 2. Yeah.
That's right.
No,
There was a guy that used to live next to my dad who that's what he did is he was a professional extra. He made really good money.
I bet. I'm sure Jeff knows. There's one like 80s henchman who was in Die Hard. He was in Lethal Weapon.
Al Leong or Al
Yes.
Long or whatever.
Yes.
I knew exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, he is awesome.
I love that dude. I
that
just
guy.
watched Die Hard the other week.
See, Die Hard to me is a perfect movie. That's on my list
Same
of
here.
movies I love. I absolutely love
Same.
that flick.
Dude,
Al
preaching
has
to
been
the
in
choir
everything.
here.
He was. There was a movie with Brandon Lee where he was the final fight bad guy in this martial arts fight against Brandon Lee, and it's actually super awesome. If you get a chance to watch Rapid Fire, just watch that end scene. It's great.
I will. I'll add that to the list because, like you brought him up, Drew. I'll watch anything that guy's in. I want to have consumed his entire filmography. And Larry, I'm glad you said
he made a fortune of being a henchman. I guarantee it.
yeah. Look at when I lived out west, I knew quite a few people that were just their whole career was extras. They were people that you'll never know them, but you'll know their faces. Like, oh, this guy was in like this movie and that movie, and then they're cool. They're chill people. They're like, yeah, I get to go do my thing. I come home, people don't bother me. I get to live my life and have the best of both worlds.
And then you run into him and you're like, why do you look so familiar?
Yeah, it's just like, oh, hey, what's up? We're both buying the same brand of cereal. That's so cool. Not really, after you see him 100 times at the store. Oh. Now, Larry, I wanted to pick your brain since you brought up two points I want to ask you about, aside from what we were talking about. You mentioned Die Hard being a perfect movie. Can you give me some other films that you would consider perfect to you like that? Because Die Hard's my fourth favorite movie of all time. I could watch it any day of the
Oh
week.
man, now I'm on the spot. Oh,
Well, take your time if you need a second, because I mean, I don't want to, rush you into it, but I'm just.
okay.
I always felt
Movies
like it was
that are-
me that loved Die Hard that much.
Okay, so movies are perfect. So it started out as a joke that we would watch Die Hard every year for Christmas, just because it was kind of a meme. However, we started doing this years ago, and my kids loved it, and it did actually become a family tradition. No joke, every December, my entire family has Die Hard night, and we've memorized it. But strictly from a storytelling perspective, it really is a perfect movie. We mentioned original Ghostbusters. I honestly think original Ghostbusters is one of the greatest movies ever made.
Fully agree.
Okay, so totally different direction. One of the best movies, perfect movies. There's a movie called Man from Nowhere, from Korea. If you've ever seen that, watch it. And there's another one that's from Japan called 13 Assassins. One of the greatest things. Have you seen it?
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it yet. I know of that. I'd see. Yeah.
Dude, it's so good. Let's see what else. Oh, you know what's one that's I think doesn't get enough love in recent years, but when I was younger, honestly, I think this is up there. Is Black Hawk Down, which Casey probably bugs her because helicopters crash, and that's.
It's a
that's
phenomenal
close-
movie, though. It's
close
a
to
very
home.
well told story. Yeah.
Yeah, but honestly, if you look, you watch that movie, like every second of that movie is tight.
Yes.
And it's so,
Yeah.
and yeah, they took some liberties with the real story, and because they had to take hundreds of people and condense them down into a manageable cast of characters.
Right.
But honestly, that one I think is an extremely well made movie.
And the performances of the actors in that movie are chef's kiss good, man.
I mean, I've known a lot of because I used to work in the gun business and was a military contractor, and so I've actually wound up knowing some guys. Well, actually, me and Casey have mutual people that we know that were in the country around that time period who knew some of these guys in person. And it was interesting what they drew from different real life people and just nailed in there. And kind of an amazing flick.
One of the things I love about that movie in particular is the I'm kind of a sucker for war movies, right? I love war movies, but this Black Hawk Down is an example of one of the movies that really nails the emotional tension and connections between brothers in arms. And they do it it's not just one dynamic where you see it. You see it in multiple different scenarios within the movie. You see multiple different facets of this very complex relationship between people when they're combatants side by side. And you see it throughout, right? I agree. It's a phenomenal movie.
Yeah. Casey, do you have any more you'd like to add to that list?
Okay, off the top of my head, I've cleared out my brain. I'll have to think about it. So somebody else take a turn.
Casey, what about you? Anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, The Silence of the Lambs was my favorite movie when I was 14 years old because I was a weird little girl. Yes, it is a perfect juxtaposition of a badass female heroine who still manages to be feminine, and a evil villain that still manages to be sympathetic. And those are some of the things that sympathetic villains are my jam, man. They are my kryptonite. So yeah.
I got another one I just thought of, and this, which is actually funny because the very first time in my life I appeared in the newspaper was I was a little kid. And I was one of those man on the street interviews where they're just getting people on the street and they're asking them a random question. And it was in the Merced Sun Star. And they asked me what my favorite movie was. And I said Aliens. And actually, looking back, talk about like perfect movies. I just recently rewatched that about a couple months ago with my daughters who hadn't seen it. And don't get me wrong, I love Alien. The original was like 1979. Movie, great movie, but Aliens, the second one, is to me almost an almost perfect movie. It's just depth. Every character is interesting, even the characters you don't get to know very well before they die. The interplay between the crew, between the Marines, is fantastic. Everybody's got a personality. Everybody's got a motivation. Everything makes sense. Even the corporate sleazeball makes sense. And then the action bits are just fantastic. One of the coolest things I ever got to do in my career is officially and canonically, I got to write the history of the M41 pulse rifle.
Nice.
Whoa, cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so for the Aliens, so I'm actually the guy, I got to write the history. So totally silly. I probably would have did that one for free. Don't tell anybody. But as a gun nut and a movie dork, that was pretty awesome. So... yeah, no, great. That's an almost perfect movie to me. I absolutely love that one.
This is going back a little ways, but here's another one on my list of perfect movies is Kelly's Heroes. As well as, and again, like I said, I'm a war movie addict, the original MASH. Because the original MASH is the perfect example of dark humor as a coping mechanism.
I've only seen the movie once. I grew up seeing the TV show, infinite reruns. And I'll be honest, it was usually the show that meant it was time for bed because it came on after The Simpsons at 11 o'clock. So it's like, all right, time to go to bed. So, I mean, I've seen the introduction to the show 150, 200 times. But I only saw the movie once. And, I mean, it was years ago. It might have been when I was in college. But it's something I need to rewatch again. I find so much enjoyment really just going backwards because... it's for as much crap as there is today, and I know there's some merit and value out there, I just don't get too angry because there is a huge back catalog of great movies, and now they just keep getting remastered and re-released, and with the exception of the French Connection, they hopefully don't get altered. But dude, rediscovery, that's the best thing about that. That's why I ask these questions to you guys, so the audience, if they haven't seen some of these movies, they can go back and check out something to be entertained, because while doom and gloom sells, at the end of the day, we want to give alternatives to this crap for people to go out and be entertained. You know, check out your work, check out other things that inspire your work or inspire you in general. So that's why I asked. Now, Drew, before we lose you on lose the topic, what about you, man? Anything you'd like to add to your list?
Yeah, I've got three I'll add. First one is The Thing by John Carpenter.
Oh, I love The Thing.
I think it is, honestly, in my opinion, the perfect horror film. It is tight, it is suspenseful, it is I love the whole thing. I can watch it from beginning to end, nonstop, any day, because it's just, I tried to find flaws with it, but if I nitpick, I'm sure I can find it, but still, it is just, it's so perfect. The paranoia is perfect in it. That's what I love about it.
Yeah.
I'm so with you. So I got a writing podcast called Writer Dojo where we just break down, me and Steve Diamond just do writing advice. And we've actually used The Thing on the show as a breakdown of like a perfect horror story to build fear, uncertainty, and dread.
Yeah.
Dude, I love that movie so much. It's so good.
Like I said, it's a perfect example of that. And it's number two for me is RoboCop. Honestly, I've rewatched RoboCop a lot, and to me, it's just, you want to talk about a character that is deconstructed and then reconstructed, and then eventually, regains a part of his humanity by the end, and winds up walking on water. Christ metaphor, but it's a great film. I love that aspect, that deconstruction and reconstruction of the character. And my third is this is a rediscovered film. I heard about it. I'd never seen it. It was Sorcerer by William Friedkin. There you go. It came out the same summer as Star Wars, and it was just killed. It was slaughtered. It was a bomb. But it is a perfect film, in my opinion, about how a director does not hold your hand. He wants you to watch it, pick it up along the way. There's not much dialogue as the movie starts off. You're kind of trying to figure things out, who these characters are. You have four random characters from four random points in the world merging at one point, and they become desperate men trying to get out of a desperate situation and just trying to survive. It is amazing. I love it, and the special effects for it, holy crap, it is incredible.
I got to check that out. I've never seen that.
Yeah, I highly encourage everyone to check out Sorcerer.
I definitely will. I like William Friedkin's work. I mean, obviously, The Exorcist is the first one I think of, but
yeah, this was the film. He was given the keys to the kingdom at this point. He was on top of the world when he made Sorcerer, and it bombed. Like I said, it came out that summer. Star Wars killed anything that summer, and it's a shame.
That was the year I was born.
It was a good year for a lot of stuff. All joking aside, though, I honestly look at that's the big shift in the way we consume movies, because I know Jaws is the first blockbuster by definition, but Star Wars is that first one that takes the marketing and a fairly good movie and all of these things and ties it together to just become
merchandising.
I love the merchandising. Believe me, people know my videos on the merchandising.
Spaceballs is another perfect movie.
I'm with you there. I can watch Spaceballs any day of the week. It's one of those, I own it on every format that exists. Oh, you want to watch Spaceballs? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I never.
It is an exemplar of the genre of parody movies.
It is, and it's its own thing too at the same time, because I mean, yes, if you watch it and Star Wars, you're gonna really love it. But I've shown it to people that have never seen Star Wars, and they're just there for it. They're just like, this is crazy. This is weird. I love this movie. I've never heard anyone say they dislike it.
Yeah.
I guess I'll just throw in one movie on the list, and then we'll keep rolling on our conversation. But for me, Back to the Future is one of those movies that I just,
yes,
that's
one
my
of the best
favorite
screenplays. One of the best screenplays ever written.
Yes.
Yeah, so that is just a fun movie.
Oh my gosh, I love Back to the Future. Back to the Future and Ghostbusters are neck and neck for me of my favorite 80s movies.
I haven't fully moved back here, but of the things I have available on my shelf, I have my Ghostbusters slime action figures. I love Ghostbusters. Everywhere I go, I have something Ghostbusters related on me, either a keychain, a t-shirt, a ringtone on my phone, something
Yeah.
I even bought that full-scale proton pack that came out a couple years ago.
Holy crap, that was not cheap. I remember that. Oh my god.
Yeah,
When I introduced my children to Ghostbusters, they were into it and they were enjoying. They were having a good time. But then they got to the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man scene, and it's the hardest my children at that point I think had ever laughed during a movie. And I had 3 of them at the time, and they were snort laughing and crying to the point that I thought they were gonna die. Just when that Stay Puft Marshmallow Man starts coming down the street, just they've lost their freaking minds. It was one of my favorite moments as a parent introducing my kids to stuff I like.
Yeah, yeah. One of my favorite things about Ghostbusters is always and will forever be Bill Murray's performance. Like I have literally in my life quoted to myself that whole speech about call it fate, call it kismet, you know. Sometimes you just gotta say, what the F, you know?
Yeah, my favorite was the bit with the mayor. Dogs and cats living together.
Yeah.
And they just leave in the bank, and he's like, "Don't worry, Ray. Everyone has 4 mortgages nowadays."
But at 19.5%, you didn't even argue with them. I love it.
That's right. Ray, if somebody asks if you're a god.
Dude, Bill Murray has the best lines in that movie. My favorite's the let's show this prehistoric bitch how we do things downtown right before they blow her away. I'm just like, yeah, come on. Every time.
Oh, so good.
Well, that was the one thing that they didn't think about when they remade that Ghostbusters movie with all the women in 2016. The love that everyone has.
Everyone's trying to be Venkman in that film.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, you need your straight man in Ernie Hudson. You need Ray to be the lovable fool. I mean, how many times does he look silly in that movie? Not everyone can be the cool character.
He's got that childish wonder. He's like the youthful optimist about everything.
We should sleep here tonight. Like when he runs around the firehouse. Yeah.
You know, there's challenges to writing an ensemble cast, and that's most of my books are an ensemble cast. I usually have like one main, star character, but if you're writing an ensemble cast, it takes a deft hand to balance this stuff. Not everybody can be the same thing. Not everybody gets to be Bill Murray. It just kills the story. Well, part of the thing too with the whole strong female character thing is it's harder for them to have the lovable fool or the imperfect person or the flawed person because you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, is that if you're trying to fill a ensemble cast and number one, it's difficult to do. But number two, if all you're focusing on is the character's role within the ensemble, you're not going to write a complete character. You're going to write a flat 2-dimensional character. And the one who's supposed to be funny isn't going to come off as funny. It's going to come off as flat. The reason why we love Venkman so much is because yes, he's irreverent and ridiculous and, hits on women and things like that. But we also get to see a little bit of a glimpse of a deeper Venkman in his, pursuit of Dana and the way that he, backs up his friends and supports his brothers, basically. Now that's a real deep read of Peter Venkman, but I'm not wrong. You know what I mean? Like without that stuff, he's just an ass.
Well, if you don't have, if he doesn't have Ray and Egon to play off of,
yeah,
yes,
and then Ernie Hudson, he's your ground dude.
Yeah,
he's the outsider.
Yeah,
when all this weird crap's going down. So as a writing trick, I like to have a thing where you'll have one character who's new to that world. So anytime you need to have some wonky thing happen that just to factor the audience reaction in, or you have to explain it, that's what Ernie Hudson was there for. And he killed it.
Yeah. Yeah. He's the guy that allows for the data dumps to not be data dumps, right? He's the guy that allows for, that can walk up and be like, what is this shit? Yeah,
like when they're by the containment field. Yeah. And he's like, what do you mean the big? And he's Egon's explaining the ectoplasm, how big it's growing, in New York City with the Twinkie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you break it down for the normal dude. That's breaking it down for the audience.
Yeah.
That's just good writing. That's brilliant writing when they do it right.
Yeah. 100%. And you're right, Larry, in that, I think that again, this is just my perception. This may not be correct. But my perception is that in a lot of, again, because we're trying to please a committee when we're writing these characters, if you're working with a female character, it's very difficult. You're walking a very fine line showing her as a character with flaws. But if a character doesn't have flaws, the character's not a real human, right? And I mean, obviously the character's not a real human, but you know what I'm saying? They're not a three-dimensional character. So they have to have flaws. They have to have insecurities. They have to have, she has to make mistakes. Otherwise, she doesn't play as real, and it's very, very difficult to empathize with her. And if you can't empathize with a character, you're not going to identify with them, and you're not going to give a shit about what happens to them. Sorry, I dropped an S-bomb. I apologize.
Oh, the channel's called World Class Bullshitters. That's
okay. Good. All right. Yeah.
You think I'm going to get offended by that?
I spent 20 years in the military because I did.
I was 8 years active duty Air Force. So
yeah. Oh yeah. I was Air Force. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Cake-eating civilian contractor for the Air Force. I understand.
Yeah, you can. I was gonna say you've got the language too, man.
Well, Casey, I'm glad you brought up the flaws in the female characters, because I've noticed that is the big trend these days. And if you call it out on the internet, you get labeled terrible things for just wanting a fleshed out, relatable, believable 3D character. And it's just
or
so many of these
a
movies.
Feminine one.
Yeah, I mean. How do you feel about a character like Captain Marvel, played by Brie Larson, or Rey from Star Wars, or one of the more popular ones that kind of is the epitome of what we're talking about?
Okay, so full disclosure, I never saw Captain Marvel. Okay, I think I should, because she's an aviator, and it would give me things to talk about. But
good luck.
But I haven't watched it. So I'll focus on Rey from Star Wars, if that's okay, just because I have
perfect.
watched it. Okay, so here's my issue with Rey from Star Wars. There is a thing known as the hero's journey in writing, right? It's a very common writing structure, I guess, that most of us use in some form or another when we're plotting a novel. It works in screenwriting and everything like that. In the hero's journey, there are certain signposts, certain events that happen, both because of external forces acting upon the hero, but also because of choices that the hero makes themselves. Rey misses the mark on those hero's journeys. One of the most powerful moments in the hero's journey is what some people will call like the black moment, or the dark night of the soul, or whatever. And it is the moment where the hero appears like they've lost everything. There's no way out. Sometimes it's literally a black moment, in that like they're like stuck in a cave or buried alive or something like that. And the only thing that helps them get out of that is something that a guy by the name of James Scott Bell, he wrote a whole series of like writing craft books that I have not read all of them, but the ones that I have read are phenomenally good. And in his book Superstructure, he calls it the Q factor. And it's named after Q from James Bond, where it's like this teeny tiny little Chekhov's gun that hopefully you didn't even notice when the author like made an offhand remark about it in the beginning of the story. But because of that, you know that this thing is there. And it's this one seemingly insignificant detail that allows the hero to find their way out of the black moment, so that they can then get to the final confrontation and defeat the big bad evil and save the day. None of that happens with Rey. And that's just one example, right? Rey, she goes from there was a lot of potential in the first movie for where she started, because she started off as an orphan. We didn't know anything about her. There was a lot there to work with, and unfortunately, the series of movies never delivered on it, because we never got to see her progress along the hero's journey. It was just like, okay, she's no one. We don't really know anything. She's got great instincts. That's awesome. She's talented, but she's untrained. And then all of a sudden, okay, surprise, she's a badass.
If you had given me or any other skilled writer the same exact characters and starting points, we could have turned in 1,000% better movie. I mean, the only bit of character growth they gave her was in the very opening act, when she gets the robot, she makes friends with the robot, the little roly guy, and then someone goes to buy it off her, and she's poor, and that would be a lot of whatever, and she turns it down. And that was like the only, and that actually at the beginning of the movie gave me a little bit of hope. And no, that was false hope. They were just messing with me, right?
Right.
She bypassed the compressor.
God.
Well, and I mean, and to be fair, Ray wasn't the only one that they did this to, right? Like,
of everybody in this whole movie, Finn got done wrong.
Oh my God.
Yes. Yeah.
He had such great potential as a character with that kind of backstory, and we never saw anything from it, right?
Dude, I could have wrote the crap out of that. That makes me so angry.
And here's my opinion. It's about the emotions, and Larry's gonna laugh because he and I just had like an hour-long conversation about writing emotions, so he knows that this is like my soapbox. But it's about the emotional piece of it. We have no emotional tie to Ray because we have no reason to have an emotional tie to her. All we get to see of her is that, okay, she's living on her own. There's this tiny little piece of development, like Larry said, where she doesn't, she doesn't sell the robot because they're friends. So you're like, okay, cool. She's got some loyalty there. And then all that we know from her after that is just, she's a badass gymnast with a lightsaber, which, okay, cool detail. Very visually fun to watch, but it doesn't make me want to like her. It doesn't make me want to find out what happens to her. I don't care. I don't care about her. So that is what goes wrong with strong female characters a lot. I have no issue with women being badasses. One of my favorite characters in the first season of The Mandalorian is the Cara Dune character, because Cara Dune is a no shit strong female character. She's built like a tank. She portrays herself like a tank. She reminds me of so many of my sisters in arms, but we give a shit about who she is because we get to know who she is as a person. We find out what she cares about, who she cares about, what her emotional triggers are, and those are the things that allow us to identify with her. And when we identify with characters, then we start to care about what happens to them.
Yeah. So Star Wars finally gets that strong female character, and they finally get it right, and they fire her.
Well, yeah.
It was actually interesting. So there was the scene in The Mandalorian where she shotguns the malfunction on her blaster, and so every gun nut in the world, like at that moment, went yes when she did that, because that was so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a fun Easter egg.
Have you guys seen the movie Haywire?
Yeah, she's great in that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so it's funny because there's the running joke about waif fu and about having these little girls beat up dudes and how it's just unrealistic. I'll say the movie Haywire was the opposite. So when she's fighting like Ewan McGregor, it's actually the opposite, and it's like I don't know if Ewan McGregor would last that long.
I've often said like that. I see that as Michael Fassbender's tryout for James Bond. I thought he was. I often think, to me, ideally, he is the James Bond, but that's never going to happen now. But she's great in that film. Yeah, she just shows you that chicks can kick ass.
Yeah, speaking of Fassbender, Fassbender's one of those guys that he's like great performances in terrible movies.
Yes,
he is like the man for that.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's not to say that skinny little women can't kick ass either. They can. However, they gotta
be more clever.
As a writer, it is imperative that you have some reason for why they're kicking ass, whether that reason is technological, as in, they're a badass sniper and they're kicking ass from a distance, reaching out and touching someone. Totally legitimate. Happens in real life.
That.
Yeah, exactly. Or they're kicking ass behind the controls of an aircraft, raining hate from 50 feet above. Totally legitimate. Done that myself, right? Or there's a reason why they're kicking ass hand to hand and they're small and skinny because they're a fucking cyborg. Sorry, I go swearing again. I apologize.
You're fine. You don't have to censor yourself here. Don't worry.
or they're some imbued with some mystical power, like oh gosh, what's that amazing movie? Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, right? It's like this mystical power of kung fu, which we know. I mean, kung fu is a martial art, but that's one of the tropes of that genre, is that there's this mysticism to it that allows these itty bitty tiny little girls to throw grown men 3 times their size over their heads. if there's a reason for it, the writer has to explain what that reason is, and in a visual format, that reason has to somehow be portrayed. Otherwise, it makes no sense, and it's not something that the audience isn't going to identify with that character.
Yeah, I've written a lot of. Well, I've written a lot of strong female characters, and so it's actually really interesting to me that whenever this subject comes up, we start picking apart bad writing. We start immediately reflexive. They put up this defense. It's a squid squirting ink. It's just reflex. It's like, oh, you hate women, misogyny. No. And I had one time somebody's like, you just hate strong women. And I go, yeah, I totally hate strong women. And then I listed off all the strong women for all my various books, and it was like 30 something things long.
And they obviously have never met your wife.
Oh yeah, my wife is a badass. Like she's
a badass.
Yeah, she is. And this is coming from Casey, the military aviator, saying that. And no, the thing is, it's just if you want to have that kind of character, you just need to write it in a way that's a believable, plausible human being. Yeah. There's this thing where they're mistaking strong for infallible. And not just infallible, but also they're like taking the worst stereotypes of strong male behavior, and they're trying to impose them on a woman. And what that just comes off as is bossy, preachy, commanding. And the thing is, the male characters that have those traits that pull it off, there's usually other charismatic reasons that lets that character be that way and still be likable. Because if you take a dude and just make him bossy, commanding, pushing, and unable to take criticism, infallible, that's just an annoying character, male or female.
Right.
I mean, I wrote one of my more popular female characters. I wrote Faye Vieira from the Grimnor Chronicles, from Hard Magic. And when this book starts out, she's a teenage Okie girl in Dust Bowl 1930s California, right? And she's a poor little redneck girl, basically. And she's completely clueless. And as this series goes on, she just gets her butt kicked, but she's basically a super wizard. And by the end, she's one-shotting, Japanese battleships in, under a minute and 40 seconds or whatever. And the thing is, nobody has an issue with that because I built this up and it made sense and it's plausible. It was over 3 novels that this girl grew in her power. Mm-hmm. And it was a very strong female character. She was still flawed. She was still feminine. She was actually kind of motherly in a lot of ways. And she had a lot of normal and relatable female traits. So kind of the opposite of Ray.
Well, yeah. Well, and that's and I kind of want to key in on another thing that you just said there, Larry, is that you said she was kind of motherly in a way. So that goes back to what I was saying about how necessary those emotional connections between characters are, right? If we don't get to see her emoting and we don't get to see her connecting with other characters, or equally valid, deliberately not connecting because of some, prior wound or whatever that she has, it is impossible for us as the audience to feel a connection to her, to identify with her, to be sympathetic to her. And we don't care, right? And so that, I think, is one of the things that they do so wrong with these strong female characters. It's not just that they lack flaws, although that's a big part of it, but they also lack real true connection. Again, going back to Rey in the Star Wars movies, like in the 3rd movie, we've got, okay, here's Rey, they're trying to make us understand that there's some story tension there because, here's Rey, she's got to get back to her friends because they're her best friends in the world. Since fucking when? Since when? We didn't get
there's not really any indication of that.
Right. The closest thing that we had to an emotional tie, and it was, again, there was potential there, and it fell completely flat, was the tension between Rey and Kylo Ren. And I'm not saying, I'm not necessarily saying that they needed to, to fall in love and ship each other, but they set up the story so that they had this mind-to-mind connection. And if that was a real thing, you're obviously going to be experiencing the emotions of the other person, or at least being exposed to the emotions of the other person. And they didn't capitalize on it at all.
Well, I think originally they were intended for her and Finn to be a relationship. Only I think that offended the Chinese market. And so they yanked that. and it just so it didn't. None of the relationships in there made a lick of sense or felt real.
Right, because it was just like
artificial.
we were told that they happened. We weren't shown that they were happening.
Yeah, one of the most basic rules of writing.
Exactly.
One of the problems too with that, in terms of the relationship, is the first movie and the second movie take place right after each other. There's no time for them to grow. It's like the ending of the first one and the second one picks up right after that. Star Wars movies take place, 3 years between the first and the second one, and then Return of the Jedi is a year later. They don't even build on that.
Which, I mean, you can do as a writer. You can have your sequel pick up, exactly where your first book leaves off or whatever. But it's the question of where's this development coming from? If someone all of a sudden levels up and there's no time break in between to where you can conveniently hand wave, and that was the thing, is that they didn't even use hand wavium properly in the Star Wars sequels. You know what I mean? It was there's a reason why we do these things, is because they're tricks that work, that allow the audience to suspend disbelief for long enough to say, yeah, okay, that works.
Well, it's bad writing. If you have a time break, it enables you to have some character growth off screen, as long as it's referenced or shown. Right. Makes perfect sense, right? So you come back after a couple years and a character is more powerful or more mature, more experienced, makes sense.
Yeah, a great example of that is, and I'm sorry to cut you off, Larry, but a great example of that is Luke at the beginning of Return of the Jedi. When he's walking into Jabba's palace, he's obviously much more powerful than the last time we saw him, but we understand that that's because time has passed and other events have happened.
The trope is he's taken a level in badass. He's shown up and he's dressed all in black. He's doing the Johnny Cash look, and he just comes in there and he rocks everybody's face, right? Yeah, so totally different. And you can also have a story that picks up 5 minutes later. I mean that. Yeah. But if you're going to do the story picks up 5 minutes later kind of thing, and I've done both in books, in series, either one works. But if you're going to pick up 5 minutes later, then you have to be where you left off, because they didn't have that much character growth in the last 5 minutes.
Right.
Whereas like on Star Wars, I mean, they went to this next movie and they went from the end where Finn was potential hero guy, picked up a lightsaber, fought a Sith Lord and got his butt kicked, willing to die for his friends, right? And they flipped the switch in the beginning of the second one. He's dumb comic relief. Yeah. Like I said, it's 5 minutes later, and it just it feels so contrived and broken.
Yeah, and even
disconnected.
Agree. And even worse, I think, in on the list of writerly sins, even worse than the no time has passed and yet you've somehow magically acquired a level in badass, is no time has passed and all of a sudden you're suddenly like you've regressed, right? It's like we talk about that whole deconstruction piece. It's like, well, unless there's a reason for me to have developmentally regressed, why would I not be at least as capable as I was 5 minutes ago?
Yeah, super annoying.
Yeah.
We could go off on this one movie for like literally hours, and I have.
I know.
Oh, same. I mean, we've built a YouTube channel from disliking that movie 8 years ago, and then turned it into a comic and turned it into other things. Believe me, you are preaching to the choir when it comes to the lack of. I just can't believe that a billion-dollar company, multi-billion-dollar company that funneled so much money into that stuff. It's mind-boggling. It used to be, this is Star Wars. At least it's going to be good. Like, pick up one of the old books. You're like, well, this is going to be a good book. This is going to be a cool movie.
Here's the thing. It's interesting. So, when they rebooted the EU, the expanded universe, and they hired Chuck Wendig. I don't know. Okay, from the laughter, I can tell you guys share my opinion of his writing.
He's a handful of sunshine.
He's a wibbly wobbly something, all right.
Yeah. Well, here's so at the time I was having a conversation with a writer who is I don't want to name him because I don't want to get him in trouble. That people will know he's my friend. He's not as out. He's politically more in the closet than I am, and we were having a conversation, and he's more successful than I am by about an order of magnitude. And we were talking about it, and he said, Larry, the sad part is if this was 20 years ago, guys like me and you would have been the very first ones they would have called. because we've demonstrated we can write action adventure, ensemble cast, big set piece action stuff, and we can also study a setting and give the fans exactly what they want. So 20 years ago, they would have called us. And this guy, like I said, he's more famous than me. He goes, in fact, I would have did it for free. He's like, if they'd called me and said, hey, you want to have the flagship EU reboot? He's like, I'd do it in a heartbeat. And I would have did it for nothing just to have my name on it. It's that big of a deal. And but who did they hire? Chuck Wendig. And not just, it's like the most unfitting, inappropriate pick for a franchise in the history of books. And honestly, the vibe that I get, not being behind the scenes here, but the vibe I get off this is honestly, it's like somebody at Disney had one friend on the con circuit, and that one friend basically introduced them to all their dorky friends, and that's how they went out the gate. Now, a couple years later, they got desperate, and they brought back Tim Zahn, guys like that. I heard they got Steve Barnes to write a Mace Windu novel here coming up. That's the kind of guys they should have had from the get-go. Dudes with resumes who've shown they can tell their own stories and learn to tell a story in somebody else's.
Fully agree.
It's the same thing with the High Republic. They, the lady, Justina Ireland's like, if you don't like my politics, you're not going to like my work, and people aren't buying those books. I mean, we had some guys on last night, 2 writers. They were talking about how it was $1 billion ad campaign to just fizzle out in record time. I mean, the collection of books sold 500 copies. 500 copies for Star Wars from Disney. What is that?
And the thing that blows my mind about that is I'm over here. I am an unabashed right-wing, libertarian-leaning Republican gun nut who used to own a machine gun store. Okay, my politics are pretty open. I write my books for everybody, and I'm never going to go on the internet and say, if you don't like my politics, my books aren't for you. Oh, no. I want your money too. I mean, don't get me wrong. If liberals want to purchase my books, I think that is awesome, and I have a lot of liberal fans because my thing is, and their money spends. Now the communists don't buy books. They don't have any money because they have to ask their mom for money. But the thing is, I mean, it's what an idiotic philosophy as a writer, as a creative. My goal is Jim Butcher says, never preach faster than you entertain. Yeah. So entertainment first, and you can I have theme and I have message, and all creatives do. But the thing is, it's got to be entertainment first, and it's got to be making the fans happy first. And so any writer who goes out there and says something like that, especially if it's an IP they don't own. I mean, if some writer wants to be, hey, it's my universe and I don't like, Group X, I don't want Group X. That's, more power to you. You want to make less money, that's on you. But you have no right to do that for Star Wars or Marvel Comics or whatever other IP it is. These people are like putting their cancerous, feelings out there about the fans. That's completely backwards. I honestly, that drives me so nuts as a creator.
Same. Drew, as a creator yourself, I mean, this stuff has to bother you. You keep a lot of that. I mean, your comics are for everybody as well. I've read your stuff. They're a lot of fun. It just seems that's the way right now with everything, and that's why fans are so sensitive to this stuff too, because I don't know, it's just bad business across the board. Now, before we move into the next topic of the multiverse stuff, because I do want to hear what you guys have to say, is there anything else you want to talk about with ensemble writing or any kind of advice you would give to people and how to do what you do, Larry or Casey or Drew?
Ultimate piece of advice I always give people is be enthusiastic. Because if you're enthusiastic, it's contagious and the reader will feel it and they'll be enthusiastic too.
When Casey gives her point, I'm going to you just hit a nail on the head when people talk to me at conventions. I'll let Casey tell her point, then I'll get to a long story.
So my point is this: professionals invest in professional development. Never stop learning your craft, right? You should level up with every novel, with every short story, with every comic, with every piece you complete. You need to level up. And if you're not leveling up, you're not studying hard enough. Professionals invest in professional development.
Well said. Drew.
So yeah, I was just going to say, like, when I go to conventions and I talk to a lot of like my cover artists or my editors or letterers, I tell them about some ideas I've got for stories, and like they tell me, it's like they'll say to me, each one tells me that it differently at different points, different conventions. Are like, I've heard stories about how energetic you get, but they see how enthused I am when I tell my stories I want to tell. You know, like when I'm plotting, how I'm thinking it's going to get plotted out, with the action scenes, how it's going to begin, the middle, and end. They're like, I feel your enthusiasm just coming out of this. It's very rare, and I love hearing it from like guys like Marat Michaels, who's been working in the business for now 30 plus years with Rob Liefeld, co-creator of Deadpool, and he likes young guys like me coming in who's full of enthusiasm and energy and wants to tell good stories. It helps bring out the energy in them. It gets them reignites the fires in them.
Dude, you and I have talked about stuff. You've told me about what you have in the hopper with that cover and everything we're working on together. And like,
oh yes,
I was like, dude, you sent me the rough outline of what you're talking about, some of the story ideas and stuff like that, and I got pumped. I've even messaged you a couple times like, when do you need it? I'm ready to start now. You're like, we got plenty of time, don't worry. So your enthusiasm, excuse me, is definitely palpable, even when you just send messages over Facebook. So
yeah, it's just this one thing. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Writing comics has been my childhood dream since I was in first grade, and I got to do it for the very first time 2 years ago, and now I've written over 16 comics in 2 years.
That's awesome.
And it's just, people just keep asking me like, hey, I got an idea. And every time I'm always saying, I'm telling myself, don't say yes, just listen to what they say. And then I start talking with them, we start spitballing ideas back and forth. I'm like, damn it. All right, this is a good idea.
Well, congratulations, man. That is fantastic.
That is awesome. That is fantastic. Also, you and I might be twins, because that's how I feel when people are like, hey, we should write a book together.
No, it's just, every time, it's just no matter where I go, it's like, and I don't know if you guys know Aaron Sparrow or not. He's one of my editors. He was writing for Darkwing Duck, worked at Boom Studios, and I'm going to be co-writing with him on a project here pretty soon too. So yeah, it's going to be my first time really co-writing with someone. So that's going to be an interesting experience.
I have to learn your turnaround time, because I guess mine are graphic novels just because of the length, but I'm just like, man, 16. So just recently I turned in my new Born of Blood chapter. It's a one-off. It's a 28-pager. I knocked out the first draft in, I think, 14 hours, 12 hours.
Holy smokes.
They just said like, oh yeah, we want a quick turnaround on this. It's like, okay, all right. So
that's awesome.
Yeah,
I labored over Woke Busters. It's just like, today I'm going to write all the jokes for this scene. Let's map this out. No, I wish I had the ability to do it like that, man.
Different worlds, man. For me, it's been average about 4 to 6 months per book for the last 15 years. So it's yeah.
Well, it's two different mediums. It's absolutely two different mediums, and
oh man, I wish I could go that fast though. That would be awesome.
Well, it's like one thing Aaron Sparrow has told me. He told me that one thing I have that a lot of other writers and comics don't have is the understanding of pacing. It's like a lot of these guys don't understand how the pacing of a comic book works, like in 24 pages or whatever. A lot of them just write a basic screenplay or whatever, and that's it. Blah. It's like, no, you've got to have breaks in it. Certain points, certain high and lows in a comic book. It just ebbs and flows. And I'm sure it's very different with writing a book too. It's like I would have to relearn writing to do that.
Well, I'll have to get some advice from you, man, Drew, in the future. Now, we have some super chats. I want to press the one real quick for our friend Sejorjan. It's just about a minute long. It'll give us a moment to reset everything, and then we're going to start talking about multiverses. So I want to thank you, Sejorjan, for your patience. And if you want to hear something crazy that nobody wrote, well, here you guys go. We'll be back in just a moment.
They say all men are created equal, but you look at me and you look at Small Joe, and you can see that statement is not true. See, normally if you go one-on-one with another wrestler, you got a 50-50 chance of winning. But I'm a genetic freak, and I'm not normal. So you got a 25% at best at beating me. And then you add Kurt Angle to the mix, your chances of winning drastically go down. See, the three-way at sacrifice, you got a 33 1/3 chance of winning. But I got a 66 2/3 chance of winning, because Kurt Angle knows he can't beat me, and he's not even going to try. So, Samoa Joe, you take your 33 1/3 chance, minus my 25% chance, and you got an 8 1/3 chance of winning at sacrifice. But then you take my 75% chance of winning, if we used to go 1-on-1, and then add 66 2/3%, I got 141 2/3 chance of winning at sacrifice. See, Joe, the numbers don't lie, and they spell disaster for you at sacrifice.
That never gets old. I love it.
No, it doesn't. So, Georgian, thank you very much.
The math checks out. So
Yeah.
If you ever
And
watch
he-
the video,
yeah.
he's just standing there yelling into a microphone with like a mesh shirt on, and this guy next to him just like looking at him like, "Holy shit, how did you do that?" Yeah, exactly. He's counting on his fingers.
Yeah. It's hilarious. I don't think math works that way.
Scott Steiner doesn't work at all. Look him up if you want to. He calls himself a genetic freak for a reason. So,
Yeah.
and at least
That's
he's
funny.
accurate.
Yeah.
But Shijorjan did say everybody else, Indy 5 movie is all wrong. James May from Top Gear. That bad guy plane is missing 5 rivets and is wearing the wrong number.
I love James May.
That's sadly how I watch a lot of movies with especially helicopter aviation. Do not get me started on how helicopters are portrayed in movies.
Every helicopter scene I write now, I send to Casey to check out. I really do. No, not a joke. Like, for real.
No, yeah, he does.
Well, if I ever have one in one of my future comics, I'll call you and ask you to be a consultant just on the scene. Like,
Yeah.
is this right? Do
Yeah.
I got it right?
Happy to help. Send him my way. Let's do it right, bro.
I'm actually one thing I'm writing with Murat Michaels. It's an ongoing Naughty and Nice series for Dynamite. Crap, I shouldn't have said that. But the third story arc, I'm including Image 53 pave loader helicopter.
That was my husband's helicopter. He was the MH-53 Pavlo. He was a gunner on
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, I was stationed at RAF Mildenhall, and those were there at the Special Operations Group.
Yeah. At the 21st, right? Is that right?
We were the 352nd, I think. At the time, I was there back in 04 through 06. So
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, that's awesome.
yeah.
What about the helicopter work in San Andreas? Have you seen that with The Rock? Like, did you just laugh the whole movie like I did, but for different reasons?
Yeah, pretty much. So, funnily enough, in the chat, Leah Brantner just mentioned that she was one of my helicopter flight engineers. We flew together at 3 different bases during our careers, and that's not how physics works, guys. So that physics in that movie is like the math from the
Scott Steiner.
Yeah, Scott Steiner.
I'm never going to be able to watch that movie again for multiple reasons, but if I do, I'm going to think of it as the Steiner math of physics and helicopter aviation. I've been living a lie that The Rock wasn't as accurate as I thought he was.
Yeah,
Oh, well.
no. That's not it. Alabama way. Yeah, you just don't lead them as much.
So, the other topic I wanted to ask you about this evening was the multiverse topic, because multiverses are, in my opinion at least, one of the laziest cash-ins that we have right now in entertainment, where you like Spider-Man? Here's 500 Spider-Men on screen. You like Batman? We'll give you almost everyone in this movie. It's, to me personally, I'm paying to see a movie that's just somebody taking action figures and putting them on the screen. It's like, hey, when you're a kid and your mom bought you the whole Batman toy line, it's like, well, I got black suit Batman, gray suit Batman, green Batman, white Batman, gold Batman, and we're all going to go on an adventure to fight the Joker together. It makes no sense thematically to me. I understand.
Well, and also now it's He-Man and Transformers are in there too. All of a sudden, in the same thing.
Yeah, it's like playing with your own toys.
And Barbie. I mean, who knows? It just all showed up all at once. But okay, so
Barbie.
this is on the multiverse, and this is kind of funny. So I have a comedy series. It's on Audible. It's called the Adventures of Tom Stranger, Interdimensional Insurance Agent, where I take the whole multiverse tropes and I just go nuts with it and have a lot of fun. And it's a comedy series, so it's absurd on purpose. But part of the absurdity is I break down the whole multiverse thing. And plus, they're narrated by Adam Baldwin from Firefly.
Oh, cool.
So it's amazing and they're hilarious. But yeah, it's #1 in customer service is the complete collection. But yeah, the thing about the multiverse, the problem with it from a realistic, like I said, this is comedy, so it's stupid on purpose, right? The problem with multiverse stuff is if everything is possible and you have every possible combination of thing, why does it matter what happens?
Right.
That's the big danger. If like, okay, so we screw up here and we can just switch to a different one where we didn't screw up. It's kind of a cop-out. So, I mean, yeah, you can tell a good multiversal story, but man, that takes good writing, and you gotta still, the key is, are there characters that the reader / watcher cares about and is invested in? Now, then you could follow them into different settings and you can bring in different versions of them, but you got to be anchored to that main one. That main one has to matter. And the thing is, we're talking about modern Hollywood, and we're talking about this. It's got to be all about character strength and character loyalty and character investment. What if we spent the last hour talking about them sucking at that exactly?
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually kind of a, I think, yeah, you could tell good stories, but it's a minefield. It's a minefield for bad writing.
And here's the sad thing. Hollywood's done it, right? Into the Spider-Verse is a phenomenal movie. And it is a phenomenal story because of exactly what you said, Larry. We give a shit about these characters. We care about these different, iterations of Spider-Man. Even, what is it, the little Spider Pig guy, right? Like
Spider-Ham.
Yeah, Spider-Ham. Yeah, like we care. We care about this character, and so the stakes in the story are less about, the overall, like, okay, well, if we do something wrong, we screw something up in this universe, we'll just go to another universe. There are reasons why that's not. They give us reasons why that doesn't exactly work. So there are actual stakes in the story, and they're emotional stakes, and they're world-changing stakes. So they've done it, but they're not doing it in live action.
So there was the Doctor Strange multiverse thing, which I skipped. I didn't care. I just couldn't bother to work up the energy to watch it on TV for a couple hours. I mean, that's how little I cared. And actually, I thought the first Doctor Strange was okay. I thought it was enjoyable. Benedict Cumberbatch, charismatic actor. He does a pretty good job. Mm-hmm. So the second one came around, and I looked at it, and I was just like, I had zero desire to see it.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about the multiverse thing, I don't necessarily think by itself it's bad, but it is honestly, I think, one of the more difficult things to write, and it might actually look like it's easier to write. Because like, oh, it's the multiverse, I can do anything. But the thing is, if you can do anything, you're no longer constraining yourselves to the foundation of the story that you've already built. And if you could just bring in any wild element, yeah, that sounds fun and can be done well, but it needs to be done well. That's the key. Yeah. And these people don't do stuff well. I mean, they've managed to take one of the biggest franchises ever. And like, I watched the end of the Honda movie, and it was like Power Rangers level bad, right? I honestly, I've seen episodes of Power Rangers that were literally better done. And I'm including the CGI in this, right? And I actually liked the first one because it was a visual spectacle that had plot holes you could drive a truck through, right? But it was still, this didn't even have the visual spectacle. It just looked like crap. So I think the multiverse is a thing that's a trap. If done poorly, it's a trap. If done well, it's an interesting story. But it's also like writing time travel. Time travel is one of those things that can be written well, but it is also super easy to write badly.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's very hard to make time travel not feel super Deus Ex Machina,
Yeah, I mean, I did it. I used a time traveling manatee. I mean, but once again, it's comedy. I can do whatever. And plus, it's a fiscally responsible manatee, so it made perfect sense in context.
Yeah.
And plus, I got Adam Baldwin speaking manatee, which was hilarious and awesome. And so, I mean, I got an actor who worked with Stanley Kubrick, and I've got him on audio going, to make manatee noises. And so it's kind of amazing. And it was honestly the pinnacle of my entire career,
Yeah.
I did like Jane Cobb quite a bit.
He's a great guy in real life. He's a squared away dude.
He seems cool. I mean, I've only seen, I only know him through his work, so I don't know anything like you would, but I like that, and he seems cool in interviews or when he's on, press things or at conventions, so.
Yeah.
He's actually, honestly, he's actually a really smart dude. He usually plays like, big, tough, dumb lug kind of characters. The guy is actually extremely intelligent and just a genuinely like nice guy. So he doesn't fit in Hollywood at all.
Yeah, I have heard that for an actor to do a good job playing a dumb character, they actually have to be incredibly intelligent. I don't know how true that is, but that's an adage that I've heard.
Yeah, in this case, yeah, he's a sharp dude. But no, yeah. Honestly, yeah. Getting back to that subject, I've done the multiverse thing, so I hesitate to say that it's bad. But would I recommend it for most people? No. And to do it with a big, here's the killer part with like a big mega giant franchise, especially a franchise that's struggling because it's been so creatively stagnant. Honestly, to me, that's like a giant warning sign. That's like kiss of death, because they can't. For the last couple of years, they have struggled to tell stories in one world that they've already established. And so obviously Spider-Man, that's Sony, so it's different. I mean, so probably a different, fresh crew, probably a different group of writers, I'm assuming. They can't, and plus, honestly, it's coming with a really unique visual style, and it's animated.
Yeah.
So very, very different too. Plus, I mean, stylistic choices. But honestly, like with the way MCU has sucked lately, and just no one cares anymore, I think Multiverse is going to just be a dead end. Unless they might surprise me. I mean, there's a lot of really creative. I don't want to it's easy to bag on all of Hollywood, but there are actually a lot of really creative people out there. They just work for morons. And so theoretically, at any point in time, they could actually make something good and surprise us. I mean, it does happen. I'm not going to get my hopes up.
Me neither. I look at a lot of this as just for them to bring back a dead character, to bring back, you have your favorite version of Spider-Man meeting Wolverine, meeting the real good, the real Iron Man, this and that. It's like, okay, so everything that's kind of come before just is irrelevant now. I watch these movies and they kind of take the stakes away, and it has this effect for me where I don't like the original thing anymore, because if it's all canon, that's what happens. It's like in Spider-Man 3, and they're like, Uncle Ben doesn't die because of this, he dies because of the Sandman. And then you go back and you watch the first one and you go, that really means nothing for Peter's character to catch the bad guy and accidentally kill him. It's not even the right guy. And that's what I take away from a lot of that. And I just hope that we move away from that. I personally would like smaller scale things. Even if it's a big budget genre film, I don't need, the end game levels of insanity with a 1,000 characters on screen jumping through portals and fight scenes that you can barely pay attention to. I like stuff that is just, I don't know, easy to watch, not, a sensory overload. That's what I'm looking for.
Jeff, that's a really good, I think there's a perfect example of that too from the same franchise we're talking about. The first Ant-Man movie was just like a heist. It was a heist movie, right? Second Ant-Man movie was a little bit bigger, but still it was basically a heist movie. Look at even the villains from it. It was, Boyd Crowder, Walton Goggins, and he's just a crook. And then the third Ant-Man movie was the crazy big Quantum Mania, big CGI extravaganza, whatever. But look at how people received those movies. On a smaller level story, they were more invested in the characters. They actually cared about Scott. They cared about his kid. They cared about his relationships. And then after saving the world, it was like, we got to take it up to 11, and we're going to go into this quantum realm thing that literally nobody cared about. I don't know anybody who watched it.
Yeah, and I mean it's in a sense it's like falling into sort of the classic writing trap of trying to outdo yourself with every book or with every episode or with every season or whatever. Like at some point you're going to jump the shark. You know what I mean? Like you can't rely on just a bigger, bad guy or a larger, more complex crisis, because you're going to jump the shark. At a certain point it's going to be like, well, so what? You know?
Yeah, I mean,
You
Bond
gotta-
did it. Jeff knows. A case in point was Moonraker. That was that was when Bond jumped the shark. And what did they do for the next one? They brought it back down to earth with For Your Eyes Only.
Yeah, it's a great one too.
Yes, it is.
That's a great example.
Yes,
You know,
that's a
honestly,
perfect example. And that's the only way to
What?
recover from that, because For Your Eyes Only is, again, it's a smaller scale story, but it's the kind of story that makes us invested in the characters because of the emotional connections and dynamics portrayed.
Yes.
Yeah, the thing is, it's like when you get down to granular level of storytelling, we talk about pacing, and it's ramping it up, bringing it down, ramping it up, bringing it down, or ramping, and then crashing. You know, but you're moving it constantly, because what happens is if you turn the knob all the way up and it's just a straight line, even if you turn it to 10, eventually 10 has now become average. So 10 is 5 to the audience, and
But
you can't
this one
go up any
goes to
higher.
11.
Yeah, this one goes to 11. It's better. Okay, so the example I use, if you ever watched a Michael Bay movie and there's just explosion, explosion. Have you ever been watching a Michael Bay movie and you actually get bored of explosions?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's I think what we're hitting on. So that's the granular level. But like looking at the big picture, I think we've gotten to the point where they've cranked it all the way to 11, and now where do you go?
Right, exactly.
Well, the answer is honestly, it's like what did they do after Moonraker? Is For Your Eyes Only, and they bring it and they just make something relatable and good. But the key is, if you're going to bring it down, this is where it gets really important. If you bring it down, but it's not really quality, then you have utterly lost them, because the audience has gotten used to this high. And now you're going to turn it back down to 5 or 6, right, to start re-ramping and retelling your story. But if you get to that 5 or 6, but it's just not there's not meat to it, then the audience is gone. I mean,
sorry, Larry, I didn't mean to cut you off again.
No, I was going to say the example is like Mandalorian. Okay, so Mandalorian season 1, everybody loved it, right?
Yeah.
It took it back down, and it's like a lower level story. It's a lower level thing. It's one dude, space bounty hunter, on his adventures, being a single dad, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but it was good. And what happened? The audience immediately locked onto that. I saw some of the audience brought up Hawkeye. Hawkeye is this kind of thing they did. They took it back down to try to start ramping it up again, but they took it down. But honestly, I don't know if it was just like it wasn't that good, or if it was just too much, fatigue, or people just didn't, or the strong female character was more awesome than Hawkeye and no one cared. For whatever reason, it just didn't stick. It didn't hit.
So it's a question of stakes, right? So when you have when you have your super high level up to 11 stakes, where it's like, okay, if we fail, the entire universe explodes. Those stakes are very high. You still have to have, in order to tell a good story, there has to be tension. In order for there to be tension, you still have to have stakes that matter that much, at least to the individual character. The reason why For Your Eyes Only, which, by the way, is my favorite Bond movie because it's the very first one I ever saw, and it's what made me fall in love with Bond.
Excellent choice.
Yeah. And the reason why For Your Eyes Only works so well is because the stakes in the movie are this beautiful woman that Bond is, in love with, the way that Bond falls in love with women, which is, she cares about avenging her family. It's been a while since I've seen it, but she cares about avenging her family, and she cares about killing this one bad guy as much as anyone else would care about not letting the universe explode. And through her portrayal of that, and through our portrayal through Bond's, Roger Moore's portrayal of Bond caring about it too, because he cares about her, it becomes important to the audience because, once again, we identify with those characters, right? But it's a question of stakes. The stakes don't always have to be world-shattering, but they have to matter that much to the character. I mentioned James Scott Bell in that same book that I was talking about earlier. It's called Superstructure, is the first one of his long series of craft books. He says the stakes are always death. Could be a literal death, Could be like, I'm going to die if I don't get out of, if I don't succeed in this quest. It could be the death of the universe. It could be an emotional death of, my heart is going to get broken and I am never going to be the same. It could be the death of my soul in that I'm going to do something bad and never recover from it and lose a piece of my humanity. But it's always death. And if you don't have those stakes, whether they're world shattering or just soul shattering for the character, the audience doesn't give a shit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, not to detract from that, but now you got me wanting to ask Larry, what's your favorite Bond movie? I'm sorry, I'm just a James Bond nut.
That's a good question.
Okay, the thing is, so I've watched every Bond movie, but I am actually probably pretty terrible at remembering the names of which one.
If you can describe any scene, I can tell you what Bond movie it is within a quick moment.
Name that Bond movie.
Yeah, because I'm not a Bond guy. I mean, I've enjoyed them, but I honestly like.
He's trying to stop this thing from exploding.
All right. Okay. Okay. So Sean Connery was the coolest. I mean, just vibe is like to me Tom Selleck is always Magnum PI. Sean Connery is always the Bond. Gosh, I don't know. Okay, so I got to pass on this one. I'm sorry. I'm letting all the Bond fans down. And of the Daniel Craig, of the recent ones, there was one Daniel Craig one I really liked, and I can't remember the name of it either, and I didn't like the other ones, so I'm so useless.
Oh, you're fine, man. Believe me. I just, whenever Bond can come up kind of organically in a conversation, my ears perk up, because I grew up liking 007 as a little kid, where kids in my school weren't watching James Bond movies. It was just kind of me on this island.
I'm going to say my favorite Bond movie is actually when Tom Cruise and Henry Cavill fight the Japanese businessman in the bathroom. Oh, wait a minute. No, so actually, because that was the best James Bond movie of recent times.
Mission Impossible has usurped James Bond as the best espionage action franchise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Since that reboot, and I'm using in quotations there because Ghost Protocol kind of fixed a lot of problems with 2 and 3. They are always better than the Bond movies, man. I went to the Chinese theater to go see No Time to Die, and they had all this special premiere stuff, and I was like, man, this is awesome. And I left that movie, man, going, man, this was terrible. I'm done with James Bond, so...
Oh, man. Okay, so the end of the last Craig Bond, the way that shook out was just... They even had, the guy that played Freddie Mercury, was a fantastic actor.
Rami Malek?
That just was so weird. And, I don't know, it's weird. And I don't know, just bizarre.
It goes against anything and everything that a Bond movie should be. And it's just... The problem with the new... What they did with Daniel Craig quadrilogy or whatever it is now at this point, it's that they focus too much on reliving the origin throughout all the films. It's the point of Casino Royale was that, okay, we got it. We got to the point. He experienced a tragedy. He's moved on. He has become Bond at this point. But each film after that always fell back to Casino Royale, Vesper and everything. No. This is wrong. Vesper was that movie. That's it. He is beyond that now. He is Bond. But no, he never moved beyond it. And that's not Bond.
I mean, because so Skyfall was actually visually a really cool movie. I mean, visually it was gorgeous. I mean, it was some of the best cinematography. I mean, I think honestly it's underrated how good the cinematography in that movie is. Beautiful movie, and I can't remember a dang thing about it, the plot.
I just remember it lifted a lot from The Dark Knight. I remember that. There was the villain wanting to be captured and breaking free and all that stuff. It's okay, this feels very much like Dark Knight, but
yeah. So I'm sorry, man. I'm the wrong guy on Bond.
Oh, you're fine. Don't worry. It just, especially when Casey brought up For Your Eyes Only, I'm like, that's a great choice. I used to have that one on tape. I would watch that ski chase constantly when he goes down the Olympic trials and all that stuff. And the music by Bill Conti. It's just a fun one.
I loved the sequence of the scuba diving underwater where, and there are two sequences, first where they leave the, and she leaves her tank there, and then they go and they find the tank and they use that to get to the control panel that they have to,
My favorite scene in that is when he kills the assassin. It's like, finally, it's like the guy who's eluded Bond the entire film.
Yeah.
He drops the pen on him in his car and just kicks the car over the cliff.
Yes.
Oh, Locke, yeah.
Yeah.
My least favorite, my funniest Bond movement was when I had Denise Richards being a nuclear physicist.
Oh God!
And there was I just remember that. I just remember Denise. I watched this in the movie theater, and I was with my wife, and they had Denise Richards as a nuclear physicist, and she's trying to act like she's smart. She's trying to play like she's really a giant brain scientist. And I remember just looking at my wife and going, "Huh." And I think I said it out loud during the movie. He's like, I'm not sold on the magic of this.
Dr. Christmas.
Christmas.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It was bad.
I don't even dislike that movie, but when she gets into the picture, I'm just like, all right, here we go. And I just have to temper everything. So let's check in with the audience, and then we're going to close this one out. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Larry, Casey, it was a pleasure to meet you guys. This was a lot of fun because I want people to watch this show to understand that there's great writers out there that produce great work. And basically, I want people to also learn a little bit about this because we have a large community of people who want to make their own comics, make their own movies, write their own novels. And it's just nice to interact with people who are so accomplished, who have done these things. And so hopefully they can pick up some of the lessons that we talk about here on the show. And Drew, you're the perfect example of a comic writer talking about, who knows how to do it. You said 16 different books under your belt so far?
In 2 years. And I've got 10 more in the burner I'm working on right now. Just one phase or another.
Machine.
Oh, hot damn, dude.
Yeah.
Our friend Low Pro, thank you very much for your very generous super chat. He says Hollywood writers find a lot of certain authors have a level of narcissism that prevents them from writing characters that aren't themselves and therefore aren't above it all or challenged by their own mistakes.
That's comic book writers too. So many comic book writers are so goddamn lazy. They have to put themselves into the book. The main character himself, that is them. It's like, no, you have completely erased who that character is. It is now you now. And case in point, Tom King, who wrote Batman for almost 90 some odd issues, he effectively made Batman depressed man, and that was Tom King after he got turned down by Catwoman at the altar. It's like, no, it is lazy. It is very lazy, and it's narcissism, and I will never, ever, ever do that.
Yeah, so my very first book, I share a lot of similarities to the main character. It was my first book, right? And I didn't know that was going to turn into a giant, long-running series for the next 15 years, right? But and so I have had people give me crap about that. But honestly, it was like, that's actually just kind of a surface, shallow level because there was the old, I took the advice, write what you know. In reality, I'm not that much like that character. I'm actually much more like some of the supporting cast. But honestly, as a creator, I think there's going to be elements of your personality are going to show up in all your characters, good and bad. Mm-hmm. But you still got to you got to subsume that. You got to put that secondary to what you're trying to accomplish with that character. And if you can make that character feel like a real human being, that you could, your reader feels like, I could talk to this dude, I could have a beer with this guy, I could have a conversation with this guy standing in the line at the grocery store because they feel like an actual human. Then you've done your job, Mm-hmm. But I know what you mean about like the lazy comic writers. I've seen some where it's like this just. They've taken pictures of the writer and they've taken pictures of the character and it's like straight up just a blatant self-insert, and it's always like some super shallow stereotypical level of writing, just weak and boring. To be good, you got to like make them people, real people. They got to feel real. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, I agree with Larry. You gotta. Every character is going to have a piece of you in it, or because that's what the act of creation is, right? But if you want to be good at it and you want to create good characters, you got to be real honest with yourself and not just create the character that you wish you were. You have to take all of the pieces of yourself and, your insecurities, your failures, your mistakes, your intentional bad decisions.
And that's what you just nailed upon is what's one big flaw in comic books today. Like a lot of these, case in point, a lot of the female characters they don't make mistakes. They
Right.
aren't flawed. You don't see
Right.
any signs of weakness in them. That's
Right.
why, like my series, Born of Blood, Jeff will tell you, that series came about from reading this shit from Marvel
Yeah.
and DC. It's like, I want to write a female character who's going to get her ass kicked. She's going to struggle, but she's going to earn it. She's going to earn her right to be a Spartan, earn her right eventually maybe be queen at the end of the story. It's just you got to show those elements. Those are true human elements.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Otherwise, there's no stakes. And
otherwise, why are we here? Why are we doing this?
And nobody gives a shit.
That's right. Well, and honestly, some of the weakest writers out there, and I don't want to bag on other people that I don't like their work that much. I'll bag on Hollywood because they're worth a lot of money, but I don't want to bag on individual writers. But there's some writers out there that, like, every character they write is the same. Like their voice, the character voice is the same. And it's
Joss Whedon.
Yeah, that's the thing. And then Joss Whedon can get away with it in some shows because he's got a really good cast of actors delivering it, and those actors,
right?
I mean, clearly,
and those actors interpret the character and give the character their own facets.
Yeah, I mean, so if you're dealing with a crew of like Nathan Fillion and Adam Baldwin and Gina Torres, you can get away with that. But if you read just like if you break it down on a granular level, everybody in Joss Whedon's universe has the exact same sense of humor, And if I'm reading a novel, and every novel like an author writes, whether it's sci-fi or fantasy in different settings, different universes, and the main voice is always snarky 50-year-old white dude, left-wing college educated. And I see Casey smiling because she's already thinking of the author I'm talking about. And it's always the same. Yeah. That's so boring to me. I mean, that's so incredibly boring because life is so much bigger and broader and more interesting than that.
Well, and it's the same. I mean, it's the same with female characters, right? Like, again, I love a badass chick. I do. I have been told that I am one. I gave birth to 2 of them. I'm descended from a long distinguished line of them. I love badass chicks. That being said, like, I get real tired of reading every badass chick, of reading the same voice of every badass chick where she's like, oh, men are only good for one thing. And, I'm constantly fighting because nobody takes me seriously because I'm a woman and blah, 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 blah. It's not to say those things don't exist. They do. I too have been not taken seriously because I'm a woman, but so fuck what, right? Like, Larry gets not taken seriously because he's a giant, everybody gets not taken seriously for one reason or another. That is not the entire conflict of your story because it is boring.
Yeah, and
nobody cares.
And you just one of the story elements I have in Born of Blood is the main series is 6 issues, but issue 2, issue 1 she learns to become a warrior. Issue 2 she learns the art of seduction, of being a woman. What a woman is dangerous in other ways. Mm-hmm. But in that training as well from this woman, she's told how, or manipulated, if you will, how easily manipulated and simple men are, how they're not worthy of her, how they're weak beneath her. By the time we get to issue 3, we see that she may be learning, like, oh my God, maybe this was wrong. Maybe I shouldn't be thinking this, maybe that's the wrong approach. And then toward the end, we see the betrayal, that she was led astray. But I love setting those things up where, she learns one thing, but it's like learns later on. It's like, oh, maybe this was the wrong thing. I shouldn't be doing it.
That's an arc. That's a character development arc.
Yeah. Learn, fail. The thing is with these self-inserts, the creators aren't going to beat up their self-insert. They're not going to make their self-insert idealized version of themselves fail. Because what's that say about them?
When they do that and everything is safe, I can never write like that. It's like every character I'm going to write, I know I'm putting them through the ringer, and it's like no one is safe.
Yeah, because I mean, if you don't put them through the ringer, it's boring.
Yes,
everybody's got to be at risk.
Yeah,
exactly.
The
stakes, about the stakes.
Imagine Die Hard where McClane's not put through the ringer. You just go, all right, it's a guy going up a building to save some people.
It turns into that Rock movie. What was it? Where he's
Skyscraper?
Yeah.
Die Hard with a peg leg. That's what I call it. Like, it's the whole defining trait of the movie. And if you know me, I don't rip on The Rock for comedic effect. I actually love him as a wrestler, but as an actor, I'm just like, whatever, man. Like,
dude, he was awesome in Moana.
I haven't seen that one.
He really was awesome in Moana. Like I'm not kidding you. He's that's probably my favorite performance of his.
I liked him in Jumanji. Honestly, the first.
Okay, I liked that.
I liked Jumanji too. Yeah, the first one was really, really good. Yeah.
Thank you to Lester San Jose, who sends this in. Need more heroes brought to humility in certain respects. I remember Luke's development in The Force. Can be humble without being a sissy.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can be beaten as a woman without being weak, you know? In fact, one of my favorite, when people ask me, so I'm not kidding you guys, almost every single convention I ever go to, I get called to sit on, or asked to sit on a panel about strong female characters. It's hilarious.
You're so stereotyped.
I know, right? So one of my favorite examples of a strong female character that blows people's minds is the original Disney Cinderella. Because this girl is a fucking survivor. She survives all of the abuse that is thrown at her, and she manages to hang on to her humanity and hang on to her kindness and hang on to her optimism, even in the face of, you know, losing her mother, losing her father, being abused by her stepmother, being mistreated by her stepsisters, you know, having things taken away from her, and she still manages to hang on to that kindness and that joy and that optimism, and that is true strength.
Yeah, humility. Actually, Lester brings up a really good point. So probably my most serious books are the Son of the Black Sword series, and the main character in that, I mean, it's fantasy Judge Dredd. All right, this dude is an indestructible killing machine. He's like the most dangerous man in the world. But I bring him to humility. I take away everything that matters to him. I ruin his code. I ruin his belief system. I basically destroy this dude. So he's still the most dangerous man in the world. And he can go out and he can kill, you know, it's very wushu, but the guy can go out and fight 200 dudes at one time and win. But it's still, that's not how you break him. Because different people are strong in different ways. So if you have a character that's, you know, infallible in every way, they're boring. So if you can have a super strong, you can have Superman, but you can hit him from other directions.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally. So Lester brings up a really good point there.
Thank you, Lester. Thank you for joining us on all of our streams. James Shark says,
I love it. Yeah, sorry.
If there's a steady paycheck, I'll believe anything you say.
Hell yeah, that's Ernie Hudson line right there.
Ernie Hudson, that's right.
Job done worth $11,500 a year.
I met Ernie Hudson at a
ectoplasm. All right.
I met Ernie Hudson at a con, and he was a nice guy, but the nicest guy I've met from Ghostbusters was William Atherton, who played Walter Peck. That was like the nicest celebrity I've ever met.
That's hilarious.
He was at a con?
Dude, oh god, yeah, he was at a con. This was years ago. He was here in Cincinnati. Ernie Hudson and him were both here. I think this was 2011. But it was Cincinnati Horror Hound when it was at the old hotel. And it's the end of the night, and I'm kind of tapped out. I'm still in college, so I didn't have a bunch of money. But I was like, hey, I don't want to bother you, man, but I just want to tell you, you play the best asshole on screen. And he goes, thank you. And he goes, please call me Bill. And he shakes my hand, and he talks to me for about 10 minutes, just about everything. Doesn't try to get me to buy anything, doesn't ask me to get an autograph. Like, Ernie Hudson was nice, but he was there for business, and I respect that. But William Atherton, I can't even watch Die Hard and not think, like, okay, what's his name? Dick Thornburg is a bad guy, but you're such a nice guy. I feel bad when you get punched in the face.
All the films he was in, as far back as like Real Genius, you know, and even the Buried Alive TV movie he did with Tim Matheson, he's always the seedy asshole, just manipulative.
So good at it, though. Such a good actor.
My husband, who also has red hair, would say that it's redhead discrimination at work.
Well, we hear about the redheaded erasure all the time on the internet, and then you kind of like look at everything and you go, well, I guess that is kind of accurate, and then you just kind of take a step back and go, I never thought about that. So
yeah, he's got feelings and thoughts on that. Yes.
Our friend Sean C.W. Korsgaard says, added bonus. Timothy Zahn also writes for Bane, and his new Icarus series is everything we loved about him in the old Star Wars EU without the brand.
Dude, that series is so good, you guys. So good.
I'll have to check it out. I love Timothy Zahn.
highly
he's-
recommend it.
I know it's DC Comics Bane.
I was just with him at a convention a couple weeks ago, and just a wonderful dude, like so down to earth, so chill. I mean, he's like one of the most famous writers in America because of his EU stuff, and Admiral Thrawn, and but just honestly, so little ego. He's just so chill. He's just a really nice guy.
Yeah, he's a super, super nice guy. I first met him at a convention a couple years ago when he was the guest of honor, and I'm still relatively new to the mid-list ranks, but I was just getting started, and he was super kind and like, oh hey, you just started writing for Bane, let's hang out, and yeah, he was really, really good dude, really good dude.
Our final question comes from Evan Rose. He says, what is best to consider when writing in a pre-existing series to get the essentials of a franchise down? And the opposite question, what should you focus on to be unique beyond removing proper nouns?
All right. Okay, so I've done this. I've written in a bunch of different IPs over the years.
Yeah, same.
And I've written in my own because when I'm writing in my own continuing series, I got a lot more freedom. But the essentials is I will always go back and I will listen to all the audiobooks of the rest of the series to get in the zone and to make sure I remember everything. Because, boy, I tell you, the longer a series gets, like Monster Hunter's 8 books, 4 spin-offs now, and an anthology of short stories. Dude, I can't remember all that.
Yeah.
And so you got to get the refresher. And then writing in other people's IPs, honestly, it's just being respectful.
Yes.
It's understand why it is what it is and have a grasp on what the fans want. And, I've been commissioned to tell some certain type of story in that universe. It's actually kind of funny because there was that meme going around after Prey, after the Predator movie came out. And they're like, we'd like to see Predator in other time zones. And there was like a meme going around, we want Predator versus Samurai. And as they were saying that, it was like thousands and thousands of people were like, yeah, Larry Correia already wrote that. It exists. And so every time I saw that meme, I was like, yeah, hey, if the studio wants to do that, call me. They already own it. I mean, they already own the rights. It would be really easy if they would like to make this. I am happy to consult for a fee.
Yeah. I think so. When you're writing in a pre-existing series, because I write in several shared universes, and there's 2 parts to it, right? First is the research, right, which is what Larry said. When you gotta do whatever it takes to get a good handle on the details of the universe, whether that's go back and listen to all the audiobooks or read through the series Bible if you're fortunate enough to have one of those, talk to the other creators, but just get a good handle on it so that you are in fact treating it with respect. That's part 1. Part 2 is figure out the feel of it. And what I mean by that is what's the aesthetic, what's the mood of the story, what are the themes that run through this universe. One of the shared universes I write in, the Four Horsemen universe, is it is a rip-roaring, doesn't take itself too seriously, mercenary-based military sci-fi universe, right? So the things that are important to get right are the military details-ish, and some of the universe details. But what's really important is the mood and the theme and the kind of fun angle of it. It's very different than the work that I'm doing with Tom Kratman, for example, which is much more serious. So find out what that feel is and be consistent with the feel of the world, because that is a huge part of the audience experience, and that is what they're expecting from you when you deliver something in a pre-existing IP. In answer to your opposite question on what should you focus on to be unique beyond removing proper nouns, your characters. Focus on your original content characters that you have created to tell the story in this world. And if you are using someone else's character that has created, focus on the same kind of thing. Get the feel of the character, get the voice of the character down, but focus on the events that you are telling and the development that you are giving to that character in order to make your story unique and stand out within the overall IP.
Well said. I was paying attention to that for just, me in general, too. I do have one last question for you, Larry. You said you're a giant. How tall are you, dude?
I'm 6'5".
Cool. So am I. I'm just curious. That's all.
Okay. Yeah, it's just funny because I don't think I'm that tall. You're not that tall. We're pretty normal. It's just everybody else is, screwing up the bell
Exactly.
curve.
Super short, yeah. Yeah.
When I went to Europe in high school, like we would walk through the castles, and they're like, "You'd be considered a giant," and they would try to kill you in old times. And then I would like hit my head on the door. There's like archways and stuff. So I'm just like, that's great that people would be afraid of me in the olden day. But I always ask.
Oh, I used to make the joke that I wasn't the best writer, but I was the tallest. But then my publisher signed Dave Butler, DJ Butler, and he's 6'8", and so all of a sudden it ruined everything for me. That was like my one claim to fame.
Plus, he wears those tall hats.
Yeah, he's like that tall, and he wears like a tricorn hat. It's just like how do you compete with this?
Yeah.
Stilts. That's what you do. You walk in with stilts.
I should just go with my drywall stilts.
There you go. Now, before we get going, Casey, Larry, what would you like to tell the audience to check out in terms of your work? I mean, you guys both have an impressive resume of work. What should the audience be on the lookout from you, or what should they be checking out right now?
Can I actually answer one of the audience, because one of the Oliver just asked a question about that in the chat. It just popped up. Yeah, right there. He says, we got Noir Fatale and No Game for Nights. When can we expect number 3 of the anthologies? So the answer is January, or at least early 2024. It is called Down These Mean Streets, and the theme of that noir anthology is going to be that of like the city, as sort of both setting and character. And it's really cool to see how our contributing authors interpreted that assignment, if you will, that Larry and I gave them for our third noir anthology. So check that out in early 2024.
That was super fun to work with. Casey and I mean, we got to work together on that for 3 anthologies now, and it's just noir, sci-fi, and fantasy. So yeah, I encourage you guys, Noir Fatale and No Game for Nights, check those out. We both have original stories in there. We got to edit a lot of really other really good talented authors. So that was a real honor.
Yeah, Laurel K. Hamilton is in all 3 of them.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, I mean, she's like she Laurel does noir very, very well.
Well, and Laurel, I mean, she's a big deal. She's a really big deal author, and for the fact that we got her to be in all 3 anthologies was a huge score for us. And she's a sweetheart. I love working with Laurel, and we have David Weber's in there. In fact, though ironically, the best reviewed story in the first book was written by my daughter.
It was. It was.
Yeah, and it was funny because like we were at a book signing once, and some guy was in line. Is like, and he's a jerk, and he comes up to my daughter, and he's like, and because she's a young writer, and he goes, "So why are you in here other than your last name?" And
what?
Yeah, it's like total dick move, right? And I didn't hear it, otherwise I would have kicked the kid's butt. But Hinckley my daughter looks him in the eyes, and she goes, well, I'm in an anthology with David Weber, Laurel Hamilton, and my dad, and I have the best reviewed story, so fuck off.
Strong female character.
I love it.
Yeah,
I gotta check out these anthologies, because anthologies are my absolute favorite form of like anything. In Stealing Solo, I threw an old anthology comic I did there just because I did it for fun years ago. I love just the short one and done boom story. Like Twilight Zone is my favorite show, so that's kind of why I love it. I love that storytelling style so much.
And if people like audiobooks, the audio of both certainly Noir Fatale, and I'm pretty sure No Game for Nights is out in audio too. I'm not 100% on that, but oh my gosh, the audio is chef's kiss good, man.
You know what? I'll add that to my list, because if it's on Audible, I have all of these credits that I never use. I keep the monthly plan. I have like 12 credits. They're always like, something's going to expire. Well, I'll download literally anything to not lose that credit and then never listen to it.
I do the same thing. I have like dozens of audiobooks I've not had the time to listen to yet, specifically because of that.
Yeah, I put them on when I draw. I get lost in them, or when I'm driving around. So
well, I can't complain though, because Audible pays like a lot of my bills. So I'm I'm glad people do that. Casey's actually got a bunch of interesting things out. She's been writing for bands. She's been writing for CKP. And so honestly, guys, I know a lot of my fans are listening. Like, if you haven't checked out Casey's work, you really should do it. She is an awesome up and coming author with a lot of really good stuff.
Thanks, Larry.
She's got a good resume.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. And if you want to find that stuff, you can just search me out on Amazon or go to my website. It's caseyzel.net. It's very creative. So
If you guys want to send me a link over in that Facebook group, I'll put a description of whatever you want the audience to find in this video. So in the future, when they watch it, they can just go right beneath the video and people can find, everything you want them to check out.
yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Same thing with you, Drew. Just, you have my contact information. Just shoot me a message, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Larry, is there anything you would like to tell the audience of yours to check out?
Just whatever you're into. I have epic fantasy with the Saga of the Forgotten Warrior, first book, Son of the Black Sword. I have 1930s alternate history superheroes, start with hard magic. Or I've got World War I magical fantasy, trench warfare fantasy. It's called Servants of War. Or my big one, the big famous one, is Monster Hunter International, which is my big urban fantasy, X-Files meets the Expendables. So just whatever you're into, I'm a multi-genre kind of guy. All my stuff is in print or in Audible and or ebook. So just whatever you're into, check it out, and I hope you enjoy it.
Larry, the preferred term is genre fluid.
Oh yes, I'm genre fluid. Yes, I am not bound by your conventions.
That's right. That's
That
right.
should be on a shirt. Drew, what about you, man? What would you like to tell the audience to check out from your impressive 16 comics and more coming?
I would say go to Merc Publishing on mercpublishing.com. You can find all the first 6 chapters of Born of Blood there. And you can find my various naughty and nice crossovers I've done with Marat Michaels at Counterpoint Entertainment. Big announcement coming this fall at New York Comic Con with Marat Michaels. Can't wait. Another Born of Blood chapter I'm finishing up right now. Got that self-published comic I'm doing right now with hopefully Jeff doing a cover. We'll see what happens with that.
Yes.
And I currently have we're actually doing special editions of Born of Blood on Kickstarter now. We're including the scripts, behind the scenes stuff, photo references, and all that stuff. So Born of Blood 4 is currently on Kickstarter, special edition. It's almost to $60,000. So yeah,
Congratulations.
So
Yeah, well done.
Thanks. So yeah, hopefully you guys can be able to check that out.
And folks, for me, I saw there's been an uptick in demand for Stealing Solo. I'll build a website for it and I'll make it available to you guys. I have some of the original printing as well as the Fandom Menace stuff. So I think tomorrow I'm just going to spend my day doing that and making sure it's a good website. But check out Wokebusters comic. Folks, it's an epic. It's 90 pages of a comedy, horror, sci-fi, whatever you want to call it, whatever you consider Ghostbusters. Well, it's a Ghostbusters-style parody of the society we live in. Instead of ghosts, we fight outrage monsters, and I'm having so much fun working on it. I know it's taken a while, but I'm just one guy who writes and draws it, and you know what? It'll be worth the wait. Like Miyamoto says, a delayed game is just delayed, but a bad game is forever. And I believe the same thing about comics. So when Wokebusters drops later this year, you guys will understand why it took so long, but you'll see the detail in every single page. So from all of us here, we have one more super chat to read from our friend Evan Rose, who says, for the Saga of Forgotten Warrior, what were your major goals in writing your first epic fantasy series, and what have you learned? Can't wait for number 5.
Honestly, this is I grew up reading epic fantasy. Was one of my favorite genres as a kid, and I always wanted to take a shot at it. And actually, Hard Magic started out was going to be an epic fantasy, but then it turned into a weird noir superhero thing. So Saga of the Forgotten Warriors, I went with a setting that was loosely based on India, and had a lot of fun with that. And I was just going for just big, epic, awesome, world-shaking events. And number 5, I'm working on it right now, 5th and final book of the series. And it's funny because the first book was released after George Martin's last one came out, and the final book of the series will be done before George Martin's next one comes out. So, pretty proud of that.
Yeah.
It's good. I'm really proud of this series, so I'm glad you like it.
Well, I would just like to thank everyone for joining us for the first episode of Writers on Writing. The turnout has been wonderful. We had wonderful guests, and folks, we'll be back next time with another episode. So until then, folks, be smart, be safe, be cool, but always be excellent to each other. And now, let's give you a nice button to play out the show. I wonder what it's going to be. Oh, we'll do this one.
You're never gonna